Our next speaker is Professor Nagendra Rao, who is presently working as a professor in history at the Goa University. His teaching and research interests include early India, early medieval India, early modern India, state formation, historical approaches, trans-nationalism, agrarian history, urbanization, cultural studies, Indo-Portuguese history, regional history, historiography, and maritime trade. He is the author of the books Brahmanas of South India and Craft Production and Trade in South Kanara. He also edited a book entitled Globalization Pre-Modern India. His research articles have been published in national and international peer-reviewed journals and edited books. I invite Dr. Rao to take the stage. And I also want to mention to all the students that we have a special high tea at the end of the program. So we look forward to you joining us for that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Kellywood and Sunaparanta for inviting me for this very interesting symposium where we had lectures, we had presentations on art and history. So I think we are meeting or we are interacting, or there is an interaction between art and history. So that is very important takeaway from this particular symposium. So title of my paper is Material Culture of a Church, Study of Mount Carmo Inventory of 19th century. So this work is based on a archival document from Archives of Goa, where there is a document on the church inventory. So how church inventory can be used as a source for the study of art, for the study of artisanal production, craft production, for economic history of Goa, history of textiles, because in the church you can find the use of various textiles for obvious reasons. So carbonates in Goa established in, say, 17th century in Goa. So this church inventory is useful to understand the material culture of Goa, or material culture of the church, we can say. How the objects used in the church become very much important here. So if you look at the objects, which I am going to show, of course they are not the original objects, but they only represent the particular terms mentioned in the archival source. So carbonates had established connections with the different parts of the world. Various parts of the world you find, like Macau, Africa, Persia, India, textiles and other objects which belong to all these regions. We find textiles called taffeta, damask, Persian silk, placing Goa within the context of Asia and Europe. So here Asia becomes important. So we can place Goa in the context of Asia. Not only looking at, of course we can look at the global trade, which historians have done actually. So we have the silk textiles, we have cotton cloths, a cloth called kacha, which is cloth used by the common people. We find the different objects in this inventory like furniture, curtains, carpets, covers, cushions, bedspreads, textiles, and many other objects of consumption in the church, and also objects used by the common people. So my paper should show elements of cosmopolitanism or cosmopolitan character of the Goan churches, which had maintained contact with various parts of the world, including West Asia, East Asia, Africa, and Europe. Now, globalization and cosmopolitanism. So, I would like to place my study in the context of these particular concepts. Concept of globalization and cosmopolitanism. Where, one point of time, Immanuel Wallerstein writing about world system theory, saying that India is not the part of world system. So it is outside the world system because it is not developed, it does not belong to developed zone, so-called developed zone. He says that India becomes part of world system only with the coming of the British colonials, not before that. So he ignores actually the Portuguese connection here. Well, because of the Portuguese context, Goa and also India, not only Goa but also all of India actually. The Portuguese went everywhere. So they were in Canada, they were in Malabar, they were in Gujarat, Bengal, So all these places you can find Portuguese. So saying that India is out of the world system theory, I think, somewhat asks for some questions. So we find a trade with the Arabs also. If you look at pre-Portuguese and also Portuguese period, we find contacts with the Arabs, with Oman, Muscat, Hormuz, all those developments, and also with Africa. So Goan connection not only with Europe but also with Asia, with other parts of Asia, becomes very much important. So churches were built using European technology and design with the assistance of the Hindu craftsmen. So that one question was being asked in the first panel, I think, regarding the indigenous artisans, whether we have any evidence. So we have a lot of evidence. A lot of sources are available with artisans signing in Kannada script. So all these evidences are available. Only thing is that we have to focus on these particular sources to understand the role of Goans, if you want to write Goa-centric kind of a research work. But again, it has to be placed in the concept of, within the context of cosmopolitanism. That is what I would believe. So cosmopolitanism as a concept which one can use, a historian can use to study these objects. So, the ability of the society to tolerate and appreciate people and things of different cultures. India in general, Goa in particular, represents cosmopolitanism. Goa had become the hub of global trade, as we all know. It comprised Portuguese, French, Spaniards, Italians, Germans, English, because we find all these people or personalities coming to Goa, writing about Goa. We find Italian perspective, we find French perspective, German perspective, different perspectives we obtain, and that is how I think we can decolonize Goan history when we depend more on non-Portuguese sources, not exactly the Portuguese sources. And we had Arabians, Persians, Armenians, Abyssinians, Japanese, Chinese, people of Java and Peru. We find Gujaratis, Deccanis, Kanaras, people from Kanara, not Canaris, Kanaras, people from Kerala, Malabar. So we find the exchange of ideas and objects. Now, cabinets in Goa. In fact, my own student is working on cabinets. So there we just see where we have the evidence that in Spain, 16th century they established they began their operation. 1607 we find evidence regarding this discalciated or barefooted cabinets in Goa. And also they had established a branch in Persia. Before coming to Goa, we find them in Persia. So then we find them in Goa. Of course, we had their very difficult experience in Persia. 1620, Carmelites establishing themselves firmly in Goa. Priests of Carmelites were mostly, it is said that they were converted Brahmins of Goa. So, so initially the church was more catered to the needs of the Brahmins, because in Goa we find the Catholics during those days they maintained the connection with their tradition. There's a caste. And the church had the objective of treating poor foreigners and pilgrims, poor people, marginalized sections. Now, the Goa mission was able to supply the finances needed for the Persian establishment. So you find the Goa-Persia connection here. Of course, Carmelites were also involved in a conflict with the Portuguese in Goa, because of propaganda fide and all those things. In the 18th century, they built a church in Chimbil, because we find already there was services provided to the Brahmins, and the Chardos wanted the support of the church. So we find that the Chimbil church was built for the Chardos. We also note that Carmelites, of course, they maintained contact with Persia, which is already mentioned here. The foreign travelers coming to Goa, so they have discussed about Carmelite Church in Goa. They suggested that Carmelites were one of the richest Catholic organizations of Goa. And we have a lot of prestige goods collected by the church. The Italian traveler Pietro della Valle, he visited the church and says that the church stands at the edge of the city upon a pleasant hill with a very delightful prospect, showing the prosperity of the church. Now, if you look at the objects and their source, Winschoter, Dutch traveler, scholar, gives information regarding lifestyle of the Portuguese and the Mestigos. So there are Castizos and Mestigos. Mestigos were those children born from the marriage between the Portuguese and the Indians. He says that the women among them wear costliest dresses produced from damask, velvet, and gold-lined cloths. And also he mentions that silk textile was cheap, used by most of the people in Goa. They wear silk cloth. Silk is not something which is not very expensive. We also find similar details if you look at objects in the Carmelite church. So there are cloths of different values. Some cloths are very expensive, some cloths are not so. And also the value of the textiles or value of the objects depend on the material used. Damask, velvet, all those gold-lined kind of textiles, so they increase the value of the textiles. We find pure gold lining, so they are more expensive than the cloths that we use. Fake gold or copper linings also we can find. And some cloths are valued at 100 zeraphins. But there are some cloths which are very you can say it's very cheap. Maybe one zeraphim or two zeraphim, and even valued with some anna. Because it's the 19th century document which I am referring to. Some objects are connected to the ceremonies performed in the church. So, for example, there are cardinals' hats with a line of gold and white taffeta. Taffeta as is in textiles. There is a curtain with the line of false gold lining of linen. So, as it uses the false gold, it is valued at 3 zeraphins only. There is reference to different kind of objects. You can say it's introduced in the ceremony. So, I would like to show some of them. This altarpiece is for those who are not aware of these particular objects. So, but this is not the objects which are found in Carmelite church, but it is only for representation. You find Chasuble. So then there are stoles, dramatics. Then there is a coat, and tabernacle curtain is there. Vestment, you can see of different colors. blue cloth used, this is a communion cloth. Then also reference to blue cloth used in the funerals, outs, cushions, cloths, the cloths of the surplice, amis. So different kind of cloths which have been mentioned. So these are some of the pictures which I wanted to show. The inventory mentions not only the objects but also their function, the purpose of this particular cloth is mentioned. Like for example, blue cloth used in the funerals is mentioned. And there is a big altarpiece with gold lining of kacha. Kacha, as I mentioned, is a common cloth used by common people. But the object is valued at 75 zerathins. It's very expensive for a this kind of cloth, but because of gold lining, the value of the object has been increased. The ritual related objects, connected objects, were more expensive than non-ritual related objects like curtains and furnitures. The value of the object depended on the material used and their function. The function of the material, the particular, of course, the material as I mentioned, whether it is gold or copper or some other material. Some of the ritual objects, they are made of silk damask. And some objects were manufactured in different, they mention the destination or particular place of manufacture, where they are manufactured and from where it was imported. So, for example, many objects are manufactured in Macau, and many other objects are manufactured in Africa. So, you find Macau Africa connection here, because Portuguese connection with Macau and Africa, the colonies with these regions. And some of the objects were brought from south. So we had one paper on Portuguese in northern part India, the western coast. Vestments were made of different colors like white, black, and red. Silk was a major textile material used, but we also find the use of cotton cloth. We find curtains, tablecloths, cushions used along with the bed balances. Cloth was used to cover the stone objects and steps, as we mentioned, the particular function of these particular objects. Calico cloths. Calico as a cloth of calicut with some designs, Blue cloths. Blue cloths were used in the funeral. A big cloth was used to cover the roof of the church. It's a very interesting description of the use of this particular textile. African cotton cloths of different colors were used in the calico material. We find a simulation of the combination of Indian and African objects and art here. Some of the cloths are painted. We find a painted tablecloth. There is a reference to tablecloths made of the Indian cotton fabric. Tablecloths were also used near wash basin. So these are some of the objects, the materials that you find in this particular church. So the main attempt has been to study the church inventory, church objects. So what do they tell us? So they tell us about globalization and cosmopolitanism, and the study of Ernest and Carrera regarding globalization, so placing Goa within the context of globalization. So these concepts that I have explained, the nature of objects found in the church, and there are many objects, a few objects that are in different parts of like Macau in Africa, as I mentioned. There was the use of taffeta silk, damask silk, calico, Indian cloth fabric. Cloths were used for different purposes, for ritual ceremonies, and also for secular purposes. So there were curtains, cushions, tablecloths, roof cover, bed valance, and so on. So various objects, which I try to study. And So this study also shows, I think, that trying to use certain concepts like cosmopolitanism, and also not only studying history of Goa in the particular perspective of Eurocentrism, which is there even today. We are told with the European historians that there is Eurocentrism, which one has to shun and look at, or try to understand the content of Goa with Asian regions, with Asian Africa, if you look at it. So Mozambique, or maybe Macau, or within India also. So with all the regions. So Canada, Malabar, Gujarat, Deccan. So we find, if you look at indigenous artisans, if you are trying to study indigenous artisans, or Goa-centric kind of study, but this has to be placed in the context of Asian art and also architecture. So that is what I would like to submit. Thank you.
I've written.